I think one of the things that women have not traditionally been as good at, and this came out in the New York Times piece when the 3 CEOs of tech companies were named as women, is that women traditionally have not been as good at sponsorship. We sort of over-index on mentorship and under-index on sponsorship, mainly because we never knew it was important. We never understood what it was. And now sponsorship is something that you obviously see a lot in the study and in the report and in the news these days, but it's also something that we have made a cognizant effort of as part of our internal network to talk about sponsorship, to explain what it is, to talk about why it's important. And the really great thing about it is you see people's eyes light up because they get it. And as soon as you understand it, as soon as you get it, you find yourself doing it more. Or you find yourself, you sort of did it all along and didn't even really know what to call it. I think that, I have found in my own career that I've been sponsored by men, I've been sponsored by women, and I don't think that intentionally women are any unkinder to women. As a matter of fact, I think it's an awful stereotype.
Let's come back to this sponsor. I want to just last point on your question. I do think what is encouraging in the UK with the Laura Davies report is that they've doubled their percentage or are going to double. I don't know the actual numbers, but a good many of those new women board members in the UK that have been prompted are new women. They're not the same women getting on more boards, so that's an encouraging sign. Let's come back to this sponsorship question. One of the things in the CED report was trying to highlight the fact that typically when we've gone from talking about mentorship to sponsorship being much more active, putting your own political capital at risk to advance someone's career. We have tended to talk about that in the literature as within our own companies, us sponsoring women within our own companies. The CED report tried to call out a new form of sponsorship that they thought was lacking, and that was having CEOs sponsor a senior woman in their own company to another CEO's board. So trying to give visibility of their senior women to another CEO's board, because that CEO knows that woman better than anybody and knows what they're capable of and their experience base, and that also helps to tap into that good old whatever network of however board positions get filled. You're sort of intervening in that pipeline. I guess, Nels, from where you sit, number one, do you see that happening of a CEO kind of sponsoring their own senior executive woman to another board, or do you think that would be helpful if you don't see it?
Well, we actually have seen it as of late with the CEOs of American Express and Pfizer and Honeywell, who have done exactly what you're just talking about. And let's face it, there are a number of CEOs out there who do not want their senior management, by the way, to be sitting on boards because they want them focused on, this is not a male or female issue, they just want their senior management focused on their company's interests. So, but I will say, in these enlightened cases, I think across the board it makes them better managers and better leaders, and there's another business case for doing this. And I think the more you see that happen, the more you'll see it happen.
Interesting.
I was in Norway teaching center leadership to a group of senior women executives, and we had dinner with 10 women who were among the first women put on boards in Norway when their quota went in. And what they said is, even though I had been head of a business division, head of HR, head of the CFO of my company, I learned so much by being on a board. I didn't know what politics were until I actually got on board. So there's so much stretching that every woman who's already qualified can do. And sponsorship, actually, the primary difference between sponsorship and mentorship is someone will put their own neck on the line, put their own capital into the game, take a risk on you, and create an opportunity that you couldn't create for yourself. So it's a brilliant idea.
Gail, do you see that at Edelman? And now with this new movement in the last year, are your women being sponsored outside of Edelman as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm probably a prime example. I'm sure this seat was meant for Richard Edelman, and I got it instead. So, so I think that I'm probably a prime example. But yeah, I think that. I think the one thing that's really important to remember that we try and really stress as the purpose of Gwen is that it's good for business. We're not doing it because it's the right thing to do. We're doing it because it's the smart thing to do. It's really good for business. The facts prove it out. There's success stories that prove it out. Diversity of thought means better management. It means better talent retention. It means better business results. And I think the more that we can sort of bring it around to those issues, the more that things like sponsorship for outside companies and for inside your own company is just going to become really very, very natural and organic.
I think we had a question. I saw a hand. Yes. This woman's dying because she thinks I'm pointing at her.
Okay. I think some of the countries around the globe have had an easier time because they see this issue as a social justice issue. So the idea of making a business case is not as necessary, and the business case is somewhat murky. But one of the issues that I'd like to ask specifically now is boards tend to be shrinking in size. Clearly they prefer sitting or previous CEOs. So you can see that with a shrinking board size, with a predisposition to previous CEOs to serve on boards, with the investor base, let's say U.S. investor base, not being particularly concerned about gender, ethnicity, or those sorts of issues. What do you think, how sticky do you think boards are? How inclined for turnover are boards from within? Because I think one of the big questions is boards, if they're shrinking in size, if they age out, which is the only way they get out, and the aging out is rising, not lowering, then what do you see are potential opportunities, or how would you characterize the issue of stickiness of boards as they sit here?
Well, I would encourage you to think about the context of this conversation is, for all intents and purposes, been sort of on the Fortune 500 boardroom. But if you think about it in terms of other opportunities in the boardroom, whether it's the Fortune 1000, the Fortune 2000, whether it's we do a fair amount of work for in the private equity world for their portfolio companies, into this notion of sponsorship. And it's like anything in life. I think that starting with perhaps a smaller board or a different type of board and gaining that board experience, and then going on to a larger board. But the fact of the matter is again, there is a lot more opportunity in broader corporate America, if you will, in terms of board opportunities. Secondly, one of the interesting things that's happened as a result of what's going on in Norway, what's happening in the UK, is there's an increased demand for American women to serve on boards in Europe, and so I think you potentially will see more of that. In terms of the stickiness of this, my sense of it is we're not really seeing that boards are shrinking that much. Obviously, we see that 72 tends to be mandatory retirement age. You are right that in some instances it is very difficult to get people to go off these boards. We are seeing an increase in the other aspect of our business, which is board effectiveness, and really taking a look at are you getting out of your board what you want, and that's also helpful in terms of transitioning some people off that can be very difficult to do in other circumstances. So.
Do you see that, Nels, as an issue of competitiveness? That if we start seeing U.S. senior executive women being recruited to serve on European boards, do you think that'll be helpful in capturing the imagination?
I absolutely do. I think it's going to be very interesting. I mean, there's a logistical issue with it. Obviously, it's interesting to be able to go back and forth, across the pond. But you do that 4 or 5 times a year besides your other job. It's tough from a logistical perspective. But
helpful. Tiffany?
Yeah, something that Mel said is still swirling in my head, which is that you've been doing this for nearly 20 years. It's always been a topic, but then in the last 18 months, it's reached a crescendo. And I'm very interested, given how quickly trends come and trends go, what has resulted in the crescendo, and how can all of us in this room, who are clearly the choir, keep the momentum going before we get out of style?
Yeah. Well, clearly, I think it's what's been happening in Europe and Norway and the UK. And again, it is, as I said, just in the last 6 months, we had a summit, if you will, of all the different search firms to discuss how we could be doing a better job in this regard. And so again, I just think it's a confluence of events that have come together to make it a unique point in time. And in terms of what you all can do. I just think it's this. It's really keeping this conversation going. It's this sponsorship piece and the mentorship piece is incredibly important, I believe. And it's also again the whole networking piece of knowing where these. Let's face it. At the end of the day, with the Fortune 500, about half of the board work that happens out there still happens by word of mouth. A search firm's not involved in it. It's more of who do you they ask members of the nominating committee who they know. So it's a matter of targeting those the companies that may be interesting for you, and who do you know on those boards, and how we can all help each other in that regard. I think that there is, it's been mentioned a couple times that that boards tend to look at former CEOs. That is true. But they're also in some of these instances, whether it's an audit committee chair, obviously they're looking for somebody who's from one of the big four firms, or who's a former CFO. So there's other criteria that come into play, and it also depends on the on the line of business as well.
Right here.
I served on 2 search committees for companies coming out of bankruptcy to put together the boards.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah. I served on 2 search committees for companies coming out of reorganization. So we needed all new boards, and I luckily was the chairperson for those search committees. We worked with search firms, and being the chairperson, I kept insisting upon bringing women to the table. And I found to my dismay that the search firms did not have in their background or folios a number of women that could even be considered. And we ended up being able to, on one board, only able to find one woman because they couldn't even bring to the table those names. What are the search firms doing? And let me just say that the thing that I found interesting was that these were middle market companies. So they didn't need to be Fortune 500 experience, but they could be other middle market, senior level executives with it, and the search firms didn't have those resumes. And as a second point, I have a friend who owns a company that she started from scratch. It's 50 employees, and I asked her to submit her name, and she was told by the search firms that she wasn't qualified. Now, she's a CEO of a successful company that's been in business for 20 years. Yes, it's a smaller business, it's 50 employees. Her customers are large corporate. How was it that she was rejected as even being considered or put forth? So I just wonder what the search firms are going to.
Well, let me answer, and I'm sure that wasn't Corn Ferry, by the way.
The other guys.
So, but I will tell you that over the last, again, I've been in this role for the last 2 or 3 years, and we have a diversity committee that's joined with our board practice, and to make sure that we have the appropriate database for our clients. And I think that we all know there are a number of organizations that you can tap into for talent. And so that's what we do in terms of making sure that we have the appropriate network for our clients, so that we have the appropriate reach into the different pools. And I will also say that, again, as you mentioned, it depends on the type of company that you're dealing with in terms of size and such. In terms of the second question, again, not knowing the particular situation, sometimes, again, there are those that are looking for, the Fortune 500 CEO, and if they're not, I don't. It's kind of a difficult question without knowing the context. If it was about why this particular individual couldn't sit on any board, I find that hard to believe, given what you've laid out. And we'd be happy to talk with her. So.